Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to bridge two entirely distinct yet fascinatingly connected halves of human cognition. We're looking at psychological source material that explores the absolute extremes of how the human mind functions. On one end, we have these highly dynamic techniques designed for expanding creative boundaries, literally ways to stretch the mind. And on the flip side, we'll examine the clinical frameworks and historical classifications used to understand and categorize cognitive limitations. It's a really brilliant look at the boundless potential of human thought, the concrete realities of its boundaries, and what that all means for how we learn and interact every single day. Let's dive in. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with fostering creative problem solving, then examine the limits of cognition, look at the characteristics of cognitive delay, review some historical clinical classifications, and wrap up with levels of adaptive behavior. Section 1. Fostering creative problem solving. Just look at this timeline. It really maps out how quickly psychologists sought to formalize the expansion of human thought back in the mid-20th century. I mean, look at this decade of innovation. In 1957, Osborne introduces brainstorming. Just a few years later, in 1961, Gordon and Prince give us synetics. And by 1967, Edward de Bono publishes his work on lateral thinking. It was basically a golden era for mapping out exactly how we can engineer those eureka moments. So, let's break these down. Synectics comes from the Greek synetakos, which means to bring forth together. It's the structured process of discovering links that you never normally combine. Think of how the design for Pringles was supposedly inspired by the way wet leaves stack together. That is synectics in action. Next up is a concept you probably use all the time, brainstorming. Coined by Osborne in 1957, the core rule here is absolutely zero filters. The problem is posed, and members throw out whatever wild ideas emerge without any fear of immediate criticism. It's all about generating massive volume over immediate quality. Get the ideas out first, sort them later. Then we have lateral thinking, proposed by Edward de Bono in 1967. And this is truly a stroke of genius. De Bono taught us that sometimes the best way through an obstacle is simply to step sideways. Instead of pushing harder and harder against a brick wall, lateral thinking asks us to reformulate the problem entirely. It's a conscious effort to view a challenge from a completely fresh angle, bypassing traditional linear logic to find a creative backdoor to your solution. Finally, our source text highlights elaboration. This technique shows how a simple skeleton outline can be fleshed out by the sheer power of human imagination. You give someone the barest bones of a problem or a scenario, like asking them to make up a rich, detailed story based on a single, simple picture, and you just watch how their mind naturally works to fill in the gaps. It's a fantastic exercise in creative expansion. Section 2. The limits of cognition. Now check out the stark difference between these two states. On the one hand, expanding cognition is characterized by abstract thinking and forming new, unified connections. But on the other hand, our source text defines limited cognition by highly concrete thinking and a severe difficulty in changing everyday functioning. We are moving directly from the abstract into the highly concrete. To really ground this, the source material provides a clinical definition by a researcher named Page. Page states that mental deficiency is a condition present at birth or early childhood, characterized mainly by limited intelligence and social inadequacy. This definition frames our understanding of what was historically termed the mentally retarded or feeble-minded child, focusing entirely on how these developmental delays manifest in early life and ultimately impact social integration. Section 3. Characteristics of cognitive delay. When we look at the traits defining these deficits, we see profound daily struggles. Unlike the agile brain we saw in creative thought, individuals here experience a very distinct difficulty shifting from one activity to another. Because their thinking is strictly concrete, grasping general verbal instructions or using imagination is incredibly difficult. Ultimately, these intellectual hurdles lead to severe social dependence, highlighting exactly why specialized care is so absolutely critical. Section 4. Historical clinical classifications. Now, this is somewhat shocking to modern ears, but these were actual, rigid clinical classifications based on early IQ tests. Individuals were historically separated into three groups: morons, imbeciles, and idiots. The source material highlights just how segmented this era was, noting that the bottom two tiers were deemed simply not applicable for normal classes. It was an incredibly stark way of viewing human capability. Section 5. Levels of adaptive behavior. This data reveals a really crucial reality about this population. Notice the breakdown here. A massive 85% fall into the mild category. Profound cases make up only a tiny fraction, at 1.5%. So, when we discuss cognitive delays broadly, the vast majority of individuals are actually navigating the mildest form of the condition. Let's walk down this severity scale to clearly see the stark contrast in capability as the IQ drops. At the mild level, individuals are considered educable, functioning intellectually around the level of a 10-year-old. Moving to moderate, they become trainable rather than educable, functioning more like a 6-year-old. By the severe stage, they are heavily dependent, neither educable nor trainable, functioning like a 4-year-old, often with sensory and motor handicaps. And finally, the profound level requires constant life support, with intellectual capabilities never exceeding that of an average 2-year-old. So, what you should really take away from this is the absolute spectrum of lived reality hidden behind a single diagnosis. On one end of the spectrum, you have mild retardation, individuals who struggle with impulse control and judgment but who are fundamentally educable. On the polar opposite end, you have profound retardation, individuals completely unable to look after themselves, dealing with severe physical deformities who require total round-the-clock care. The term cognitive delay encompasses both of these vastly different lived experiences. We have covered a ton of ground in this explainer today, from the exhilarating heights of synetics and lateral thinking all the way to the profound clinical realities of delayed adaptive behavior. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Whether we're intentionally pushing the limits of human imagination or clinically defining the strict boundaries of intellectual functioning, how does our understanding of the mind shape the way we teach, train, and ultimately support each other? Thank you for exploring these dual psychological frameworks with us today, and keep questioning how we understand the incredible complexity of the human mind.